She said she needed to find herself, and I wasn't part of that. The first time she said it, it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a pause. Something responsible, something healthy. She looked at me across our kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from, and said, "I just need some space to figure things out," and I nodded like a supportive partner instead of someone who felt the floor shift under his feet. I want to be clear about something before I go on. I loved her. Not in the loud, dramatic way people write about, but in the quiet, daily way. The way you buy the same brand of oat milk without asking because you know it's the one she likes. The way you automatically reach for your phone at 3:14 p.m. because that's when she usually texts to complain about work. The way her toothbrush just belongs next to yours, and it would feel wrong to move it. We were good. That's the part that makes this hard to explain, and harder to accept. We weren't toxic. We didn't scream at each other. We didn't have explosive fights or betrayals or anything you can point to and say, "There." That's where it broke. We were stable, comfortable, close. Which is why, when she said she needed to find herself, my first instinct wasn't panic. It was trust. We'd been together for almost 4 years. Met in our late 20s, when both of us were tired of games and half relationships. We moved slowly at first, then all at once. Weekend trips turned into shared grocery lists. Her apartment turned into our place without either of us officially saying it out loud. She used to tell me I made her feel safe. That with me, her mind was quieter. I held onto those words longer than I probably should have. The night she brought it up, nothing was visibly wrong. No argument, no tension. We were making pasta. She was cutting garlic too slowly, the way she always did, like she was afraid of hurting it. She said, "I've been feeling kind of lost lately." I leaned against the counter and said something useless like, "About work?" She shook her head. "About me." That should have been my warning. But I smiled and said, "That's normal. Everyone feels like that sometimes." She didn't smile back. "I just don't know who I am outside of everything," she said. Outside of us. Outside of routines. I remember thinking, okay, that's fair. People grow. People change. Love isn't ownership. That's what emotionally mature adults believe, right? So when she said, "I think I need some space," I didn't argue. I asked what that meant. She said, "Not breaking up. Just breathing room. Time to think." I told her I understood. I told her I supported her. I told her I was proud of her for being honest. All of that was true. And all of it cost me more than I realized at the time. At first, nothing really changed. We still slept in the same bed. Still ate dinner together. Still said, "I love you," before leaving for work. The difference was subtle, like a draft you only notice when you stop moving. She started spending more time alone. Long walks with headphones. Sitting in the other room with the door closed, journaling. I told myself this was healthy. I told myself not to be clingy. When I texted her during the day, she took longer to reply. Not ignoring me, just slower, less detail. Instead of paragraphs, I got sentences. Instead of sentences, emojis. I noticed. I didn't say anything. One night, I asked if she wanted to watch a show together. She hesitated, just a second too long, then said, "Maybe later." "I kind of want to be alone tonight." "Sure," I said, immediately. Too quickly, like I was auditioning for the role of cool, understanding boyfriend. I sat on the couch alone and tried not to count the hours. Weeks passed like that, not dramatic, not explosive, just thinner, less substance, like our relationship was slowly being put on a diet neither of us discussed. She stopped making future plans. If I mentioned something months away, she'd say, "Let's see," or "I don't know how I'll feel then." That phrase started to hurt more than I admitted. I asked once, gently, "Are we okay?" She said, "Yeah, this isn't about you." That sentence should come with a warning label. Because when someone says it, it doesn't mean you're safe. It just means you don't get to defend yourself. I wanted to be patient. I wanted to respect her process. I read articles about giving your partner space. Every single one said the same thing: don't pressure them. Don't panic. Focus on yourself. So I did, or I tried to. I went to the gym more. Started cooking elaborate meals she didn't always eat. Cleaned the apartment obsessively, like order could replace connection. Sometimes she'd come home late and apologize vaguely. I lost track of time. I never asked where she'd been. I didn't want to be that guy. But there's a special kind of loneliness that comes from sleeping next to someone who's emotionally elsewhere. She'd lie facing away from me, scrolling on her phone, the glow lighting up her face. I'd want to reach out and pull her closer, but I was afraid of reminding her I existed. That fear didn't come from nowhere. It grew slowly, fed by small moments. Like the time she forgot my birthday dinner. Not the date, just the plan. She scheduled something else and texted me, "Can we reschedule?" as if it were a dentist appointment. I said yes. Like the time I told her I'd had a rough day, and she said, "I'm kind of drained right now. Can we talk later?" Later never came. I started to feel like an obligation she was trying to manage gently, instead of a person she wanted to be close to. Still, I waited, because waiting felt like love, because leaving felt like failure. One evening, I finally asked, "How long do you think you'll need?" She looked uncomfortable. I don't want to put a timeline on it. That's when the panic started to seep in. Quietly, at night, when she was asleep and I was staring at the ceiling, wondering how you lose someone without them actually leaving. I replayed our entire relationship, searching for mistakes. Maybe I was too stable, too predictable, maybe I made her life too easy, and she mistook that for stagnation. I hated myself for thinking that. But I did. I started apologizing for things she hadn't complained about. Being too quiet, being too attentive, being myself. She reassured me, again, "You didn't do anything wrong." Which somehow felt worse, because if I'd failed, at least I'd know why. The distance kept growing. She moved some of her things into the spare room, just for now. She stopped saying, "we," when she talked about the future. She started saying, I might travel. I think I need to live alone. I need to figure out what I want." I noticed none of those sentences included me. One night, months after that first conversation, she sat me down again. Same kitchen table, same untouched mug. She said, "I don't think I can be in a relationship right now." I asked, "With me, or in general?" She paused, just long enough. "I don't know," she said. "I just know I need to choose myself." I nodded, again, because apparently that was my role. She moved out slowly. A box here, a bag there. Each trip felt like a small amputation. She hugged me goodbye every time. Said, "Thank you for understanding." Understanding became my curse. We didn't officially break up that day. Or the next. Or the next. We just faded. Texts became check-ins. Check-ins became silence. One day I realized I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. I wanted to be angry. I wanted a villain. Someone to blame. But there was no affair. No betrayal. Just a woman who chose a version of her life that didn't include me. "The last time we spoke," she said, "you'll always mean a lot to me." I didn't ask what tense that was supposed to be. Now, months later, I still catch myself thinking about telling her things. Small things. Like how I finally fixed the leaky faucet. Like how the cafe she loved closed down. Then I remember there's nowhere to send those thoughts. She didn't leave suddenly. That's the part that haunts me. She left gradually, carefully, like someone stepping back from a painting they've decided they don't want anymore. And I stood there the whole time, holding the frame, telling myself that love meant letting go. Even when letting go meant disappearing from her life entirely. I don't hate her. I don't even blame her. But some nights, when the apartment is quiet and nothing feels anchored, I wonder when exactly I stopped being part of her becoming, and started being something she needed to move away from. There was no goodbye, no clear ending, just absence. And somehow, that's the part I'm still trying to survive. I thought that would be the end of it. That last conversation, that quiet drift into silence. I told myself this was where people usually stop talking about it, where you say we broke up and move on. But that's not how it felt. It didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like being slowly erased while still expected to smile about it. The apartment changed after she was gone. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. The rooms echoed in a way they hadn't before. Her absence wasn't loud, it was precise. Empty hooks in the bathroom. Half a shelf in the fridge. A lamp that stayed off because I never liked the way it cast shadows, and she was the only reason it existed. I kept everything where it was for longer than I should have. Not because I thought she'd come back, but because moving her things felt like admitting something final had already happened without my consent. People asked how I was doing. I said, "Okay," because explaining felt too complicated. How do you tell someone you're grieving a relationship that technically ended months ago, with no clear moment to point to? There was no day I could circle on the calendar and say, "That's when she left." Instead, there were dozens of smaller moments. Like waking up on a Sunday morning and reaching for my phone, realizing there was no one to ask what she wanted for breakfast. Like hearing a song in the grocery store and instinctively turning to make a comment, to no one. Like seeing a meme I knew she'd love and feeling stupid for still knowing her that well. I started replaying everything again. But differently this time, not looking for what I did wrong, looking for when she started pulling away. It's strange how clear things become in hindsight. The way she stopped asking about my day. The way she listened with her eyes somewhere else. The way our conversations shifted from sharing to reporting. I remembered a night, near the end, when I was talking about something that mattered to me. Something small, work-related, and she nodded, distracted. Halfway through my sentence, she checked her phone. She apologized immediately. Said, "Sorry, go on." I did, but something in me closed. Not fully, just enough. I wondered how many times she'd already left in her head before her body followed. I didn't reach out for a while. Pride, mostly. Also fear. Every unanswered message during those last months had trained me to expect disappointment. But then one evening, after a particularly quiet day, I sent a simple text. "Hey. Just checking in. Hope you're okay." She replied hours later. "Hey, yeah, I'm good. Just been busy. Busy building a life I wasn't part of." I stared at that message for a long time, trying to decide if there was anything left to say. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "Glad to hear." That was it. That was the conversation. I told myself that was closure. It wasn't. What hurt the most wasn't that she chose herself. It was that she did it while asking me to stay emotionally available. While thanking me for being understanding. While leaving the door just cracked enough that I never knew if I was supposed to wait or walk away. She never said, "I don't love you anymore." She never said, "This is over." She said things like, "I don't have the capacity right now. I'm just trying to be honest. I hope you know how much you mean to me." Those sentences sound kind. They aren't cruel, but they also don't let you grieve properly. They keep you suspended. I started to doubt myself in ways I hadn't before. Not just as a partner, as a person. Was I boring? Too steady? Too available? I caught myself thinking that if I'd been more distant, more unpredictable, maybe she wouldn't have needed space. I hated that thought. I hated that part of me was willing to rewrite my own personality to make sense of her leaving. Friends told me I deserved clarity. That I should ask for answers. That her ambiguity was unfair. They were probably right, but I didn't want answers she didn't want to give. I didn't want to corner her into saying something she'd already said in every possible indirect way. So I stayed quiet. Time passed. Real time, not the blurred kind. Seasons change. I noticed because the walk to work felt different. Colder, then warmer. One day, I realized I wasn't checking my phone as often. That the reflex was fading. It scared me a little. Not because I wanted to hold on, but because it meant something had finally ended. I ran into her once. Completely by accident. A coffee shop near my office. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked lighter. Different haircut. New coat. She smiled when she saw me. A genuine one. "Hey," she said. "Hey." We talked for 5 minutes. About nothing. Work. The weather. She said she was doing well. That she was learning a lot about herself. I said I was glad. And I meant it. When we hugged goodbye, it felt familiar. But also distant. Like hugging someone you used to know very well, and now only know the outline of. As she walked away, I didn't feel angry. Or jealous. Or desperate. I felt empty. Cleanly empty. Later that night, I realized something that hurt in a new way. She hadn't abandoned me in one moment. She had slowly stepped out while I stayed, adjusting myself smaller and smaller to make room for her absence. I thought being patient was love. I thought understanding was strength. I thought waiting proved something about my character. Maybe it did, but it also cost me parts of myself I'm still trying to find. I don't regret loving her. I regret how quietly I let myself disappear in the process. There's no lesson here, no moral, just a truth I'm still learning to live with. Sometimes people don't leave because you failed them. They leave because they're changing, and they don't want to carry the weight of explaining why you no longer fit. And sometimes, the hardest breakups aren't loud or dramatic. They're the ones where no one does anything wrong, and you're still left alone, holding memories that belong to a future that never happened. I don't know if she ever thinks about me. I don't know if I was a chapter, or just a phase she outgrew. All I know is this. She found herself, and somewhere along the way, I had to learn how to exist without being chosen. After that night, after putting words to it in my own head, I expected something to change. Some kind of release, like naming the pain would shrink it. It didn't. What changed was quieter, more unsettling. I stopped missing her in the way people usually mean it. I wasn't replaying kisses or laughing about inside jokes. I missed the version of myself that existed when I thought I was someone's choice. I missed the certainty, the way my future used to feel occupied instead of blank. There's a specific kind of grief that comes from realizing you were optional. Not unwanted, not rejected in a dramatic way. Just, not necessary. I tried dating again. Not because I was ready, but because people kept saying things like, you should get back out there, and it'll help you move on. Like motion alone could solve this. The first date went fine. She was nice, asked questions, laughed at my jokes. At one point she reached across the table and touched my hand, and my body reacted before my heart did, a small flinch, like I'd forgotten the rules. On the walk home, I felt nothing. Not relief, not excitement, just distance. I realized I was comparing everything to something that no longer existed, not even her, exactly, but the way it felt to be included in someone's internal world. That's what I lost, access. With her, I used to know what she was thinking before she said it. Used to feel like I was inside the room where her decisions were made. Toward the end, I was standing outside, waiting to be updated. And now, with new people, I didn't know how to enter at all. I kept thinking about the phrase she used, finding herself. I wondered what that even meant. Was she lost before me? Or did being with me make her feel like she disappeared? I cycled through both possibilities until they blurred together. Some nights, I felt angry in a way that surprised me. Not explosive anger, just a low, dull resentment that made everything taste bitter. I thought about all the times I swallowed questions to be supportive. All the moments I minimized my needs so she wouldn't feel pressured. I wondered if I'd made it too easy to leave. That thought scared me the most, not because I blamed myself, but because part of me believed it. I talked to a therapist. I said things like, I don't think I was enough, and waited for her to correct me. Instead, she asked, enough for what? I didn't have an answer. Enough to stay, enough to choose, enough to be considered worth anchoring to. She said something that stuck with me. Sometimes people don't leave because you're lacking. They leave because staying would require them to become someone they're not ready to be. I nodded. I understood it intellectually. Emotionally, it felt like being handed a map after the house had already burned down. I started noticing how often that language shows up everywhere. I need space. I need to focus on myself. I'm not ready for a relationship. They sound like pauses, like temporary states, but sometimes they're endings that don't want to admit they're endings yet. What hurt wasn't that she changed. It was that I stayed still while she did, waiting for her to come back and tell me where we landed. She never did. Months later, I found one of her old sweaters at the back of my closet. I don't know how it survived every purge, every attempt at moving on. It still smelled faintly like her laundry detergent. I held it for a long time, not crying, just standing there, aware of how much meaning a person can pack into an ordinary object. I didn't put it back. That felt important. I still think about her sometimes. Less often now, but when I do, it isn't with longing. It's with a quiet curiosity. Like wondering about a stranger you once knew very well. Did she find what she was looking for? Did the space she needed ever stop expanding? Did she ever look back and realize how carefully I tried not to be in her way? I'll never know, and that has to be okay. What I'm learning, slowly, is that love isn't just about giving someone room to grow. It's also about whether they want you in the room while they do. I was willing to adjust, to wait, to believe in us even when she stopped naming it. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't dishonest, she just chose a future that didn't include carrying my heart alongside her own. And I think that's what makes it linger. There was no betrayal to hate, no lie to unravel, no dramatic ending to process. Just the gradual understanding that someone can care about you deeply, and still decide you're not part of the life they're trying to build. I'm still here, still learning how to take up space again, still reminding myself that wanting to be chosen doesn't make me weak. It makes me human, and some nights, when the quiet settles in and there's no one to witness my becoming, I remind myself of the truth I resisted for too long. She didn't leave because I wasn't enough. She left because she needed a life where I didn't exist. And surviving that means learning how to exist anyway, without clarity, without closure, and without the comfort of being someone's destination. Just, here. I wish I could say that was the moment everything started to feel lighter. That once I accepted it, the weight shifted and I could finally breathe again. But acceptance isn't a switch. It's a habit, and I was still bad at it. There were days I felt almost normal, productive, social. I'd go hours without thinking about her, and when I noticed, it felt like a small victory I didn't want to jinx. Other days, the grief showed up sideways. I'd get irritated at nothing, lose patience with strangers, feel exhausted after doing very little. It took me a while to understand that I wasn't missing the relationship, I was missing orientation. When you're with someone long enough, they become a reference point. You make decisions with them in mind without even realizing it. What time you wake up, where you live, how late you stay out, what you tolerate. After she left, Every decision felt heavier. Unchecked, like there was no internal witness anymore. I remember standing in the grocery store one evening, staring at 2 identical jars of pasta sauce. She used to have opinions about that kind of thing. Strong ones. I stood there longer than necessary, suddenly aware that no one cared what I picked. That freedom everyone talks about? It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being untethered. People tell you to focus on yourself, like it's a clear instruction. But when you've been building your sense of self alongside someone else, focusing inward feels disorienting. There's no mirror, no feedback, just a lot of quiet questions. I started noticing how much of my emotional life during those last months had been about anticipation. Waiting for replies, waiting for reassurance, waiting for her to come back into focus. Even after she was gone, my body hadn't caught up. I still felt like I was waiting. One night, I caught myself rehearsing a conversation with her in my head. Not a dramatic one, just a simple update, something mundane, and when I realized what I was doing, I felt embarrassed. Not because I missed her, but because part of me still expected to be heard by someone who had already moved on. That expectation took longer to die than the relationship itself. I stopped dating again, not out of bitterness, just honesty. I didn't want to bring this unfinished version of myself into someone else's life. I didn't want to treat new people like temporary shelters from an old storm. Instead, I spent more time alone. Real alone, not scrolling, not distracting myself with noise. Just sitting with the discomfort long enough for it to stop trying to impress me. And slowly, things surfaced. I realized how often I'd prioritized being easy to love, how quickly I'd minimized my own needs if I sensed they might inconvenience someone I cared about. I'd told myself that was maturity, compromise, emotional intelligence. Maybe it was, but taken too far, it turned into erasure. I thought back to that first night she said she needed space. How instinctively I stepped back. How I never asked what that meant for me. How I never said, I'm scared. Or, I don't know how to do this without clarity. I was so focused on not pushing her away that I never checked if I was being pulled with her. That realization hurt in a different way. Not sharp, just heavy, because it meant I had been present for my own slow disappearance. I don't think she meant to hurt me. I still believe that, but intention doesn't change impact. Sometimes I imagine an alternate version of that conversation. One where I say, I can give you space, but I can't exist in limbo. One where I draw a line, gently, but clearly. I don't know how she would have responded. Maybe it would have ended sooner. Maybe it would have ended the same way. But at least I wouldn't have learned this lesson so slowly. There's a strange shame that comes with being left this way. Not dumped, not rejected outright, just outgrown. It makes you question whether you were ever essential, or just convenient at the time. I don't talk about this much in real life. People prefer cleaner narratives. They want to know who messed up, who to side with. This story doesn't give them that. There's no villain here, just 2 people whose paths stopped overlapping. But I was the one standing still when the overlap ended. Every once in a while, I wonder if she knows how it felt. Not in a guilt-inducing way. Just whether she understands the quiet cost of leaving someone behind without a clear ending. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. I'm trying to be okay with not knowing. What I know now is this. Love requires more than patience. It requires mutual presence. It requires choosing each other not just emotionally, but structurally, in plans, in priorities, in the shape of your days. I was willing to choose her through uncertainty. She wasn't willing to choose me through her becoming. And that difference matters, even if no one did anything wrong. Some nights, I still feel that hollow space open up. The one where a future used to live. But it doesn't scare me the way it used to. I'm learning how to fill it with my own weight again. Slowly, imperfectly, not because I've moved on completely, but because I finally stopped waiting for someone who already left. And that, I think, is the beginning of something, even if I don't know what it's becoming yet. There's a moment I don't talk about much, because it feels too small to matter, and somehow too honest to ignore. It happened months after she'd moved out, long enough that people assumed I was better, long enough that I was tired of correcting them. I was cleaning out my email inbox, deleting old receipts and promotions, when I found a message from her I'd missed. Not new, dated weeks back, a subject line that said, "Just wanted to say hi." My stomach dropped like it used to. That automatic response, hope before logic could intervene. The email itself was short, polite, casual. She said she hoped I was doing well, said she'd been thinking about me, said she didn't expect a response, just wanted to check in. I stared at the screen for a long time. That message summed up everything that hurt about the way she left. The softness, the distance disguised as kindness. The way she could touch my life without stepping back into it. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Responding would put me back in the position of being emotionally available to someone who had already decided not to be. It felt strange, choosing myself in a way she once had. The quiet after that decision was different. Heavier at first, then clearer. I started paying attention to how often I'd confused endurance with love. How much pride I'd taken in being the steady one, the understanding one, the person who could hold space no matter how uncertain things became. There's something validating about being needed, even if the need is one-sided. Especially then, I realized I'd been surviving on proximity instead of reciprocity. Being near her, being patient for her, being there in case she came back. That, in case, had shaped more of my behavior than I wanted to admit. I stopped telling myself stories about what might have happened if I'd done something differently. Not because I found peace, but because I ran out of energy. Grief, I learned, isn't just sadness. It's fatigue, from carrying unanswered questions, from rehearsing conversations that will never happen, from wanting something that no longer exists in the same form. One afternoon, I caught myself smiling at something genuinely stupid, a dog wearing a sweater, tugging its owner down the sidewalk, and the smile didn't collapse into guilt afterward. That felt important. I didn't suddenly feel whole, but I felt present. I began to notice how my body responded to the world again. How music sounded fuller, how silence didn't always feel like punishment, how my apartment started to feel like mine instead of a temporary holding space. Sometimes, though, the old thoughts came back. Usually late, usually uninvited. I'd wonder if she ever missed me the way I missed her, not as a comfort, but as a constant. If she ever reached for her phone instinctively and remembered there was no one on the other end anymore. I wondered if she ever regretted the way she left. Not the decision, just the lack of finality. The way she let me linger in uncertainty because it was easier than closing the door. Those thoughts still sting, but they don't consume me. I've stopped asking whether she'll come back. That question has an expiration date, even if you don't notice when it passes. Now I ask different ones. What parts of myself did I abandon while trying to be understanding? What did I learn about my limits? What kind of love do I want to be part of next? I don't have clean answers. What I have is a quieter life. One where I don't wait for permission to exist fully. One where I don't measure my worth by someone else's capacity to include me. Sometimes, when I think about her, I don't feel longing anymore. I feel something closer to grief mixed with gratitude. She was real, what we had mattered, and it ended in a way that taught me something I wouldn't have learned otherwise. Not everything that ends does so with clarity. Not everyone who leaves does so cleanly. And not every wound bleeds where you can see it. Some just hollow you out slowly, until one day you realize there's space inside you again, and you get to decide what fills it. I don't know where she is now, or who she's becoming, and for the first time, that feels like information I don't need. What I know is this. I stayed longer than I should have because I believed love meant waiting. She left because she believed love meant choosing herself. Both of those things can be true. But if I've learned anything from this, it's that love without mutual presence isn't devotion, it's self-erasure. And I don't want to disappear like that again. So I'm here, still becoming, still imperfect, still learning how to stand inside my own life without shrinking. Not because someone asked me to, but because, this time, I'm choosing to stay. There's one last thing I keep coming back to, even now. It doesn't arrive as a thought so much as a feeling, subtle, persistent, like a low hum you only notice when the room goes quiet. It's the realization that the relationship didn't end when she left. It ended earlier. I just didn't know it yet. I think about that version of me who was still trying to be patient, still translating her distance into temporary confusion instead of a permanent shift. I want to reach back and tell him something simple. Not dramatic, not angry, just pay attention to what's missing. Because love doesn't usually disappear all at once. It thins, it softens, it becomes careful, and if you're not careful yourself, you start compensating for the loss without realizing that's what you're doing. I remember the last time I told her, I love you, and felt unsure if it landed. Not because she didn't say it back, she did, but because the words didn't settle the way they used to. Like tossing a stone into water that's already drained. I told myself I was overthinking. I was very good at that. What I wasn't good at was asking for reassurance when I needed it. Or admitting that her journey, however valid, was hurting me. I treated my pain like an inconvenience. Something to manage quietly so she could focus on herself. That's the part that still makes my chest tighten. Not that she left, but that I helped her leave by making myself smaller. There's no moment of triumph at the end of this story. No sudden clarity where everything clicks into place. Healing hasn't been cinematic. It's been slow, uneven, and mostly invisible. It looks like waking up and not reaching for my phone. Like making plans without checking anyone else's availability. Like catching myself mid-apology and realizing I don't actually owe one. Sometimes it looks like sadness without panic. Missing without spiraling. Remembering without hoping. And sometimes, if I'm honest, it still looks like grief. I still feel the echo of being chosen, and then quietly unchosen, in places I don't expect. When someone takes too long to reply. When plans feel tentative. When affection feels conditional. Those moments don't send me back anymore. But they remind me. They remind me that being left without a clear ending doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. It teaches you to brace for absence even when someone is standing right in front of you. I'm working on that, slowly, patiently, with myself. I don't tell this story because I think I was wronged in some dramatic way. I tell it because I know there are other people sitting in the same quiet space I once occupied, waiting, understanding, convincing themselves that love means endurance. If you're there now, I won't tell you what to do. I don't have that authority. I'll just say this. If someone is finding themselves, and you're no longer included in the process, pay attention to what that costs you. Because love shouldn't require you to disappear in order to prove you care. She said she needed to find herself. And she did. What I had to learn, much later than I wanted to, is that finding yourself shouldn't require leaving someone else lost in the process. There was no explosion, no final argument, no clear ending I could hold on to. Just a slow uncoupling, a quiet choosing, a life she stepped into where I didn't follow. And I'm still here, not healed, not whole, but present, standing in the aftermath of a love that ended without saying goodbye. Learning how to stay, even when no one is watching. Some mornings, I wake up and the bed is empty, as it's been for months, and the first thought isn't longing anymore. It's just awareness, a recognition that the person who once occupied that space is no longer part of my life, and that I am still here. I don't hate her. I don't even resent her. I love her, in a quiet, bruised way that doesn't need to be returned. And I carry that love carefully, like something fragile that belongs entirely to me now. Sometimes I catch a trace of her in a song, a smell, a passing smile on the street. I notice, and then I let it pass. No reaching, no hoping, no unfinished sentences. She said she needed to find herself, and I wasn't part of that. And I realize now that I was never supposed to be. The rest of the world goes on. People meet, fall in love, move apart. And I keep moving too, learning to exist without being chosen, learning to value my own presence, learning, finally, that being left behind isn't a measure of my worth. I don't know if she thinks about me. I don't know if she ever will. And in a strange, painful way, that's exactly how it should be. Because the story of this doesn't end with words or closure. It ends with absence, with emptiness, with the quiet knowledge that sometimes, love isn't enough, and that the hardest goodbye is the one where no one ever actually leaves, but you are still left alone. And so I carry on, quietly, with all that I was, all that I hope to be, and all the love I will give again, someday, somewhere, when the timing is mutual, when the choosing is shared, and when no one has to disappear to find themselves. Those moments don't send me back anymore, but they remind me. They remind me that being left without a clear ending doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. It teaches you to brace for absence even when someone is standing right in front of you. I'm working on that, slowly, patiently, with myself. I don't tell this story because I think I was wronged in some dramatic way. I tell it because I know there are other people sitting in the same quiet space I once occupied, waiting, understanding, convincing themselves that love means endurance. If you're there now, I won't tell you what to do. I don't have that authority. I'll just say this. If someone is finding themselves, and you're no longer included in the process, pay attention to what that costs you. Because love shouldn't require you to disappear in order to prove you care. She said she needed to find herself. And she did. What I had to learn, much later than I wanted to, is that finding yourself shouldn't require leaving someone else lost in the process. There was no explosion, no final argument, no clear ending I could hold on to. Just a slow uncoupling, a quiet choosing, a life she stepped into where I didn't follow. And I'm still here, not healed, not whole, but present, standing in the aftermath of a love that ended without saying goodbye, learning how to stay, even when no one is watching.